Welcome to the Verum Epiphania podcast, a serialized reading of the audiobook Verum Epiphania. Episode 5. Chapter 12. The Philosopher, the Chemist, and the Astronomer. The Baron unlocked the door and showed Stefan into a silent, musty chamber lit by wavering tapers. Low fires glowed sullenly from several wide hearths. As his eyes grew accustomed to the dimness, Stefan could see he was in a splendid drawing-room library. Its high arched ceilings were supported by fluted stone pillars, and sumptuous rugs covered an intricate stone mosaic that was the floor. Bookshelves filled with hundreds of great bound volumes lined the walls and were crisscrossed by stairways connecting multiple galleries. Hanging in the spaces between the shelves were curtains of richly hued velvet, adorned with the Baron's crest. Ancient-looking parchments and scrolls were heaped on numerous heavy reading desks and tables. Stefan now noticed a shadowy figure sitting alone at a table in a chimney corner. He was dressed in rich golden robes and, on his head, which was bowed to pour over a massive leather-bound manuscript, he wore the gold crown-shaped hat the haberdasher made. Stefan thought the hat made him look very much like the Magi on the poster. Absorbed in thought, the man took no notice of them. The Baron nodded towards the silent figure. "My youngest brother," he said in a hushed tone. "The great philosopher. From this room he ponders the teachings and truths laid down by the great thinkers from the deep past in rare and obscure volumes." The Baron hurried Stefan across the library. At the opposite side they passed through a doorway that communicated with an adjoining chamber filled with sulphurous fumes. The shelves lining the walls here were crowded with flasks of brightly coloured liquids and jars of vibrant pigments, powders, and precious minerals. Long tables were covered with a bewildering array of curious instruments, fantastic-looking machines, and elaborate apparatus whose purposes Stefan could only guess. At one of the tables sat a man dressed in green robes. On his head was the green Egyptian-looking headdress from the haberdasher. Again, Stefan thought that, with his hat, the man looked very much like one of the Magi on the poster. This man also took no notice of them, as he was hunched over a mysterious-looking device, adjusting one of its dials with infinite care. As he turned the dial, he stared fixedly into a flask holding a green liquid with a phosphoric glow. Stefan watched, mesmerized, as the liquid flashed into a vapor and danced like a living thing. In the flickering green light, Stefan thought the man looked sorcerous. "The middle brother," the Baron said, "the great chemist. Here is where he transmutes physical matter from one thing into another and bends nature to his will." The Baron strode quickly across the lab to another door. He pushed it open to reveal a third laboratory, this one filled with even more fascinating and peculiar contraptions. Armillary, astrolabes, sextants, and large celestial globes, along with a multitude of cameras and several handsome brass telescopes. The tables here were piled with maps and charts of the night sky, and ancient-looking parchments of the heavens illustrated with centaurs, fauns, and other mysterious figures. On one of the tables rested the third hat the haberdasher had made, the tall, pointed cobalt-blue headdress embroidered with silver and gold stars. The Baron placed it dramatically on his head, like a self-coronation. With his hat, the Baron reminded Stefan not only of the third Magi on the poster, but also of a wizard or magician of old. The vaulted ceiling between the pillars here was, like the Baron's hat, blue and spangled with silver and gold stars. The Baron motioned Stefan through a side door and into yet another turret. Here they climbed spiraling stairs up and up until a ceiling abruptly blocked their ascent. The Baron pushed open a small door set into the ceiling and climbed a ladder through the light-filled opening. Stefan followed and found himself standing at the top of a crenellated turret, open to the sky. A colossal brass telescope gleamed dully in the winter sun, its stretching tube thrust out over the turret's edge like a great digit pointing incriminatingly at the sky. The Baron made a sweeping gesture at the sky with one hand and placed the other over his expanding chest. "And I," he proclaimed, "I am the great astronomer, From here I study the heavens to determine man's true place and standing in the universe. But the Baron's words hardly registered with the young boy. Stefan was too overwhelmed by the breathtaking view of everything above and below the castle. When he was able to form a thought, it was of his father, and how much he would appreciate the Baron's magnificent telescope. His next thought was how wonderful it was to be so close to the heavens on Christmas Eve. While the great astronomer busied himself at the telescope's eyepiece, Stefan walked the turret's perimeter, taking in the sweeping views. To the north he could see his shadow on the sloping mountainside far below. He was wonderstruck to see a bright rainbow-coloured halo radiating from his shadow's head. He called out excitedly to the Baron, "Come look! My shadow has a saint's halo!" Without looking up, the Baron replied in a droning monotone, "It is called the Brocken spectre, merely an optical illusion caused by sunlight shining behind a high-altitude observer onto airborne ice crystals opposite him. Some people, like you, are reminded of saints. Others, like those who lived near the Brocken Peak in Germany whence its name is derived, were reminded of witches and evil." Somewhat dispirited with the Baron's clinical response, Stefan moved to look to the west. Here again he spotted something remarkable that revived his spirits. In the treeless ground between the castle and the forest was an arching dome of snow that, to Stefan, looked like it had been sculpted by some otherworldly hand into delicate statues of people kneeling in prayer. It appeared to the imaginative boy as if the cold and frost had fixed an entire congregation still while they gave penance. Once again, Stefan called out excitedly to the Baron and described what he saw as a church service of snowmen taking place on the mountainside. Once again, the disinterested Baron answered in an inflectionless voice as he sighted along the length of his telescope. "What you see is old, hardened, high-altitude snow sculpted by sunlight. As the sun hits the snow, it turns directly into vapor, forming depressions. These depressions focus sunlight, much like the lenses of this telescope. Over time, the light hollows out the snow and leaves behind leaning, pointed columns. These were first mentioned in writing by Charles Darwin in 1835. Are you familiar with Darwin's work? No? I thought as much. He developed the theory of evolution, explaining how natural forces, like those that shaped your penitence, shaped all living things into what they are today." Stefan's heart sank once again at the Baron's cold scientific explanation. Then it positively plummeted as an army of servants emerged from the castle, converged on the suspended congregation, and beat them with spades into mounds of snow, which were then shoveled into wheelbarrows and carted back to the castle. Stefan gaped in shock and asked the Baron why the figures had been destroyed. The Baron, still deeply absorbed at the telescope's eyepiece, casually explained, "Precipitation levels have been far below normal this year. Because of that, and because our new mechanical brain needs constant cooling, we have been harvesting the snow and ice around the castle to melt for water. The water is used in the steam engines that drive our air conditioning machines." This also explained to Stefan both the bare ground surrounding the castle and the ice blocks in the moat. Hoping for a more cheering view, Stefan moved to look out to the east. Here and there on the mountain's flanks he could see the winding path he had followed to the castle. He traced it uphill until he spotted the Greek temple, the Baron's Folly, where the minstrel lived. But strangely, he could see no trace of the woman's hut or garden. He was certain he was looking at the exact spot where her hut had been, but there was nothing there except the ancient crumbling ruins. Confused, Stefan said to the Baron, "There was a woman I spoke with on my way here who lived in a hut next to the Greek temple. She had been a minstrel at the castle." "No one lives on our lands," the Baron interrupted, fairly growling, "without our leave. And the castle hasn't had a minstrel for centuries. Please, boy, cease and desist with these fantasies." Indeed, Stefan himself was beginning to wonder, as he stared hard at the vacant spot where the woman's hut had stood, that perhaps he might have imagined his extraordinary encounters in the forest. But then the feel of the sturdy shepherd's staff in his hand told him otherwise. Stefan shifted his troubled gaze beyond the mountain now and looked out upon the patchwork of tilled fields stretching into the dim distance. The boy fancied he could just make out his parents' farm, halfway to the hazy horizon. All at once, his thoughts were whisked away to joyous Christmases at home with his family. This was followed by a pang of homesickness that rose up so sharply in him that all the wonders of the castle could not compensate for it. Stefan wished with all his heart he could be back home now with his parents. Chapter 13. Bodies of Ice. "Come, boy!" the Baron shouted suddenly, startling the boy from his reveries. The great astronomer was waving Stefan over to the telescope. "Look here, and you will see the so-called Christmas comet." The Baron pushed a wooden stool beneath the telescope, and Stefan stepped up onto it. The boy put his eye to the eyepiece and, as he was accustomed to looking through his father's telescope, waited patiently for his eye to adjust to the view. When it did, he gasped in wonder at the spectral figure that was the comet. To the boy, the comet's tenuous atmosphere, a cloud-like spindrift that formed a gauzy film against the pale blue sky, looked like an angel with outstretched gossamer wings. Stefan was bursting to share his impressions of the comet, but guessed the scientist would only rebuke him again. So he held his tongue. "There," the scientist gloated. "Do you see now? It is only a body of ice surrounded by a vapor of icy particles and rarefied gas and nothing more." Stefan had come to expect just such a cynical description from the Baron, but still, the comments left him feeling dispirited. He suddenly began to shiver uncontrollably. Whether it was from the frigid air or the Baron's ice-cold reason, he could not tell. He leapt down from the stool and stepped away from the Baron. The boy's thoughts returned now to his father, and how different, how delightful it would be to share this experience with him instead of the Baron. How he wished his father could be here. It was these cheerful, rousing thoughts that prompted Stefan to pleadingly blurt without thinking, "Do you think my father could come to the castle and look at the comet through your telescope?" Stefan realized his grievous mistake even before the words escaped his mouth. The great astronomer flared. He stood over the boy and glared at him with merciless eyes. "Do you not understand?" he roared as he glowered at Stefan. "What a privilege it is for you to be here. This magnificent instrument is not to be squandered for recreational use, to gaze upon the comet as if it was some shiny bauble. This is a precision scientific tool for intellectual pursuits, not for mindless entertainment." Stefan ducked his head at the rebuke. Blood rose in his cheeks and he stammered, "I beg your pardon, my lord." The Baron stalked back and forth in front of Stefan and pressed on. "The difficult and noble pursuit of knowledge is not a trifle. The discovery of great truths is predicated on disciplined study and scholarly merit, not the vagaries of amateurs who ascribe meaning where there is none and invent useless answers to even more useless questions." "Of course, my lord," the boy half whispered. The Baron's expression became hard and cruel. "So, to answer your foolish question, your father can pay like everyone else to look through the telescope we have so generously provided for that purpose? Did you not see the posters in the village? Are you that unobservant? Did you pay no mind whatsoever to the photo you yourself delivered for the lithographer?" "My apologies, my lord," the boy parried. "I did see the photo and the posters in the village." The mention of the broadside, along with a desperate desire to redirect the conversation, made Stefan think of another question for the scientist. He was confident the great man would not think this new question was foolish, so he quickly ventured to ask, "Now that you mention the broadside, my lord, since you and your brothers do not celebrate Christmas, why did we call it the Christmas comet?" the Baron cut in. "And why did we include the Magi on the poster?" "Yes, my lord." "Now," the Baron said approvingly, "those are questions worth asking and answering." Stefan heaved a sigh of relief at having successfully shifted the topic of conversation. The Baron, pleased to see the boy showing an interest in his important work, held forth with great fervour. "Great advancements in science," the great scientist soliloquized, "require vast amounts of labour, materials, and, as you've seen, energy. They also require vast amounts of capital. To finance our great contribution to the advancement of science and mankind, my brothers and I deemed it was only fair and just to raise the capital we required directly from the masses, who will benefit from our work. So, when we discovered an ordinary and unremarkable comet would be visible this Christmas, but only through powerful telescopes like ours, we graciously mounted one of our finest telescopes on the hotel's roof. Then we advertised the comet in our posters as the Christmas Comet. Why? We deliberately intertwined the myth of the biblical Christmas star with the comet to appeal to those with religious tendencies. There are fortunes to be made in pandering to the pious masses, in supplying them with comfort and hope. We simply exploited this primitive tendency of the weak-minded in order to use their own money for something that would eventually benefit them, to present these lost souls with a true savior, the oracle my brothers and I have created as a gift to the world. It is a sterling example of the end justifying the means. The great scientist pressed on fervently. The magi in the poster have a twofold meaning. Besides evoking the mythical magi, they also represent my brothers and me. Score another one for the haberdasher, Stefan thought. The Baron now drew himself up to his full height. His voice boomed and marched in echoes down the mountainside. We are the conduit between mankind and the true Epiphany. We deserve the hats we wear. It is us who will reveal and proclaim to mankind the supreme savior we have created for their own salvation. The Baron paused now to regain his composure and retrieve his Bible he had placed on a desk next to his telescope. Clutching his magnum opus tightly, he looked gravely down at Stefan. This telescope is but a primitive instrument, a blunt stone tool compared to the artificial intelligence my brothers and I have created, and now you shall be the first to experience its omnipotence. Come quickly. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Verum Epiphania podcast.